Obviously, the first thing in welcoming you is to remind you all that the meeting will be now on web. It'll be on the council's YouTube channel. So best of behaviour, please.
Sorry, can I just say, whoever's speaking, I can't hear you.
Can everybody else hear me?
You have to speak up a wee bit louder.
Hold on a second. I don't like wearing these now.
I bet the microphone's good. Don't know where to plug it in.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Aye, well, I had somebody drilling in the background as well, so.
Okay, well, maybe if everybody puts on your mute, keep on your mute, so it gives everybody a chance to hear everybody else. Okay, so as I say, it's now on the council YouTube live stream. Have we got any apologies? I know, can I give you one right away, is Willie Doolan? Any further apologies?
Yeah, there's apologies from Councillors Cullen, Docherty, and as you say, Convener Councillor Doolan. And in terms of Standing Order 64A, Councillor Gallagher is a substitute for Councillor Cullen.
Okay, have any further apologies, Willie?
We have apologies from Annette Valentine and potential apologies from Lynn Anderson, who's getting a change to her internet provider today and may not make the meeting.
Okay, that's fine. Before we move to the full meeting, it's take a great pleasure in announcing or introducing our new Vice Convener, Nora Mooney, to our first official environment transport meeting. So keep in there, Nora, keep me right, as you probably will need to. So moving on to item 1 of the agenda, colleagues, is declarations of interest in terms of ethical standards in public life. I will intimate at the outset I've got two, item 5 and item 8, but because both of them are just here for noting, colleagues, I don't need to leave the meeting, and I won't, so is there any more declarations of interest? Willie?
Same as you, Chair, on number 8, the
Number
SPT.
Yep, that's fine. Any further declarations of interest? Don't see MD. So I'm going to move on then to item 2, which is development of waste services assets, and that's from pages 5 to 12. I'm going to ask Andrew to come in and speak about that. Andrew?
Thanks very much, Convener. Yep, members, the reports there will very briefly just highlight the key points. The reports there really, it's updates the Council's programme work number 28, which is really to maximise use of the Council's assets. Sections 2.1 to 2.11 cover the Council's 2 landfill sites, or ex-landfill sites, Auchinleigh and Dalmacoulter. There was a proposal to turn the Auchinleigh site into a super depot facility, but for the reasons explained in 2.1, that's no longer a viable project. However, we are still trying to eke some income from that, certainly through the gas production on site, and looking to explore the possibility of siting a solar farm on the actual landfill itself. In terms of Dalmacoulter, the proposal there is to offer a long-term lease to a private investor to come in and run and operate a waste transfer facility at Dalmacoulter. One of the issues we have when we go to contract for waste disposal is that a lot of the companies either don't bid or are uncompetitive because they don't have a base within North Lanarkshire. This will allow us more people to compete for our waste, which will obviously drive down the cost for disposal. The council won't be faced with any cost for the actual development of the site, but it will benefit from the actual interest in that. We did have an industry day in January. We now know that 14 people are interested in the actual development of the site. The consequence of that is we put in a planning application September 2020, and we hopefully get a positive outcome from that sometime in January, but we'll have to wait and see. And similar to Auchinleigh, we're also looking at the possibility of establishing a solar farm on Dalmacoulter itself. The principal reason for that is we have existing grid connections at both these sites, and that's sometimes a limiting factor when you're talking about solar power. It's similar to Dalmacoulter, but on a much smaller scale. We're also looking at expanding the licences at Ward Park and Netherton to turn them into mini waste transfer stations. This effectively will just be for council waste. At the moment, we have a number of services, whether it be housing, land, or even waste itself, running small vehicles to a number of processors. Ideally, what we want is these vehicles coming back to the depot where we bulk the waste and then we send it to the actual end processor. That'll make it a more efficient service and a more efficient way of disposing of our waste. In terms of partnership working, there's the council continues to explore it, certainly in private. I've already mentioned that, but also in public partnership as well, to make best use of our resource. The most notable one there was we looked into developing a paper card processing facility within the central belt of Scotland, but for the reasons detailed there in 2.17, we needed 500,000 tonnes to make it viable. The 10 local authorities which we were discussing only had the combined tonnage of 70,000. However, that doesn't mean that we stop looking at that, because I think there's a real need now for local authorities to come together so we actually deliver a more circular economy approach within Scotland. In other words, the waste that we produce in Scotland should be treated in Scotland. In terms of the alternate weekly collection, which is in 2.21 to 2.27, there are a number of concerns with this collection system that we currently have in place. It covers approximately 5,500 properties within the council area. It only collects 780 tonnes throughout the calendar year. This is compared to the 60,000 tonnes which we collect from our other recycling streams. The quality of that recycling is very poor, meaning 40% is sent straight to landfill, so there's no recycling at all of that. The cost to recycle this element is round about £101 per tonne. When you compare that with £108 per tonne that we currently pay to dispose of our residual waste, the economic argument is very weak. And there is only 2 processors in the central belt of Scotland that actually take this material now. So the concern that we have is that we will be collecting material that there is no home for if these 2 processors stop that. And the final issue for us is it's very costly. It costs us just under £250,000 to actually deliver this service to a relatively small number of properties. So the proposal to committee today would be to remove the alternate weekly collection cycle, and any properties that would be affected by that would transfer onto a weekly black bin collection scheme. But we do accept that there will still be people who wish to recycle within these areas, and to do that we will deliver the communal recycling facilities similar to the road system which is there, but it will be aligned to our 3 weekly collection. In other words, it'll be paper and card and it'll be glass, metal, plastic. We will move away from the alternate weekly collection recycling scheme. So that's really a very quick run through of the report, convener, and there's 4 recommendations to committee on the front page, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Andrew. Wally, I see you've got a question or a comment. Thanks.
Thanks, convener. Just like to thank Robert Steenson for making Andrew's job a hell of a lot easier today, because there were a lot less questions than I had when Robert came to our group the other week. Just a couple of things, and Andrew's actually covered one of them there. It was just on the potential energy generation from the methane gas. Or that, I take it that's going to be quite viable, or it's something that we can do for a carbon capture. And the other one was just, do we envisage how the alternative weekly collection changes are going to affect the recycling? Are we going to have bins? And is there the potential that people in flatted properties with a recycling bin can end up getting tagged because of their neighbours not behaving themselves, shall we say?
Okay, is it okay, convener, to take those questions?
Yep.
Thanks. The first one was with regards to the gas production. The gas production at Dalmacoulter is now complete. It's not there anymore because on a landfill site, the gas production decreases as the landfill site ages. Around about 25 years afterlife, really, is what we're looking at for gas production. It's still very active within Auchinleigh because that's a relatively only a few years ago that closed in comparison. So we an income roughly about £150,000 per year from the gas production, which then creates electricity, and then we sell it onto the grid. So through the solar farms, that's where we will make additional income. We're not talking millions of pounds here, but it certainly delivers an additional income to the council as well. Again, at no cost, because it's a partnership agreement, and a private company comes in, they set up the wind farm, the solar farm, and then we get a percentage of the actual electricity generation as well. In terms of the alternate weekly collection, the recycling, there'll be communal recycling facilities, Councillor, which means that if there is any contamination, we will still have to take it away, but we can't tag it because it's a communal facility, similar to the node type facility.
Okay, thanks for that, Andrew. Any other further comments or questions, colleagues? I don't see any in the chat bar. So with that, then can I direct you to recommendations? There are 4 of them in page 5. Are we happy to agree?
Sorry, Michael, to interrupt. Geraldine's intimated that she wants in.
Sorry. Oh,
Sorry, convener, I know it was late there.
right, on you go, Geraldine.
It's just a question for Andrew. It was just on 2.21. What areas does this cover? The 5,500 properties? Is it flats or?
Predominantly it will be flatted properties, but there's also some properties that are just by the nature of their design, they might not have a front and back door that can be accessed, so they won't have the full 4-bin system. So there will be a mix of properties across the council area. It's not restricted to any one particular area. And that's one of the problems why it's so expensive, because it is so scattered.
Okay, you happy with that, Geraldine?
Yeah, it's just in the report it doesn't mention any areas. That's why I was asking.
Okay, that's fine. Okay then, colleagues, can I then ask you to agree the recommendations on page 5? Is that? Yep, okay. Thanks for that. Moving on to item 3, the resilience planning and business continuity planning. And this is here for noting, but I'm going to ask Andrew to come in and speak to this for a wee bit, because it is very relevant to what's happening in the world around us just now. Andrew.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, the report really there is really just to provide, this is an annual requirement on us to provide update in the council's arrangements regarding business continuity and resilience planning that the council has. As members be aware through previous reports, we do have a new suite of guidance which has been available to all services, which has allowed a consistent approach to business continuity across the services and ensures that it's constantly updated and reviewed. And it's been critical over the last 8 months or so, for obvious reasons. It's been the key reason as to why the council has been able to deliver its critical services throughout the pandemic. So I suppose in summary, what we can say is that we do have very robust and very successful business continuity arrangements in place. We have continue to deliver all our health and social care responsibilities. Our waste services were continued, and that's based on good business continuity arrangements. But certainly a response, it wasn't perfect, it never can be, and I think a critical aspect of good business continuity is that you constantly review and you constantly update your proposals. And in light of the lessons that we've learned through the pandemic, we asked all heads of service to review their current business continuity arrangements, and that has now been done and completed by the 31st of October. The reason for reviewing it in that timescale was to ensure that we beat any second wave which was being predicted in terms of the pandemic, and also before winter as well. So there is a brand new business continuity plan which applies to the council. And to give members just some comfort, following the introduction of that and following the review of our business continuity arrangements, we asked all heads of service to look at the 5 levels which the Scottish Government introduced as part of the national framework in response to the pandemic, and then set their services against those individual levels. In other words, to determine if the restrictions at these levels were brought in, what services would continue, which would reduce, and which would actually stop. And apologies that this information is not in the report, it's just been released, but I thought it'd be relevant to bring today that the council has round about 425 business areas that it delivers all individual elements of what we do as a council. And I have to say that even if at the level 4 restrictions, which is the highest level of restriction which the Scottish Government which will bring in, 84%, that's 358 of our services will continue as normal. You shouldn't see any difference. 10% will be reduced. They won't be stopped, but they'll be reduced. If I take an example of my own service, Environmental Health Trading Standards, we have reduced that service because the service has been channelled into delivering on the pandemic, and we still have the same number of staff, but they've been tasked to do other things. But only 6%, is 24 of those 425 services would be stood down. And when you look at the services that would be stood down, it's the ones you fully expect. It's those that are associated with the leisure industry and that type of thing. So that should provide us with a good bit of comfort. What we have to say is that this all assumes that we have a complement of staff which is able to deliver those services. And again, the exercise that we're doing at the moment is looking at those services that are reduced and those that are stood down. We will then redirect those full-time equivalents into the critical service areas, which will then allow the service to continue delivering its own critical services. So really, the report is just for noting, Convener, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, and I think it is critical, and it's been very noticeable that we were ready. You know, this planning always is on in the background, and you know, we don't even see it as councillors, but it's always been there, and thankfully it was there when we needed it. But as Andrew said at the very start, we don't always get everything right, and we always learn from, you know, to make sure that when we do make mistakes, we'll always come back better. Anyway, I can see Willie. Willie, you want to come in? Thanks.
It's just really to make a comment to thank the officers and staff of the council for the work that they've done so far, and the fact that we are planning ahead. It must be extremely difficult to maintain services, but it's nice to see that we do actually have plans to try and keep things going as much as we can. Unfortunately, I fear we're going to be in this position for quite a bit of time to come, but it's nice to see that plans continue to be produced.
Thanks for that, Willie. Yep, absolutely. Unfortunately, I agree with you. But you know, the sooner we can get out, the better. There's a wee bit of light at the end of the tunnel the other day there, but let's hope we can get out as soon as possible. So, colleagues, as you know, the report is here for noting. Are you happy to note that report? Thank you. So I'll move on to item 4, which is a country parks for the future. Now, this is a very good report. I'm going to ask Nicole to come in and speak to this. Nicole.
Thank you very much, Convener. Members will be aware of the One Place, One Plan report, which was approved at the Policy Strategy Committee back in March 2020, which introduced the whole programme of country parks for the future. So this paper provides an update to both programme of work items PO 25.1 and PO 25.4. It summarises the proposed master plans to each of our country parks in both Strathclyde, Pallasrig and Drumpellia as part of the Seven Lofts project. And each of these seeks to build on the park's role as a key community asset, to focus on improving core visitor facilities, to develop new attractions to meet the evolving needs of our communities, to improve connections to communities through new and enhanced gateway facilities and access infrastructure, strategically to improve the health and well-being of our communities, and to promote third sector and private sector involvement in our facilities. Key early actions have been identified in the report, and as well as proposals to further communicate and consult on these plans with communities and key stakeholders. The report also provides detail on recent studies undertaken with Green Space Scotland on the Park Power project, and it highlights the significant potential for renewable energy and heat from green space within Strathclyde Country Park. It details the feasibility studies for solar photovoltaics and a water source heat pump at Strathclyde Country Park. There are 3 recommendations to committee within the report, all the other details on the paper, and I'm happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thanks for that, Nicole. Willie, I've just seen you coming in there. On you go, Willie.
Thanks, Convener. I've got a number of questions. I don't know whether you want to take them all together or take them individually. Don't know what suits. Let's just start and then give me a wave if you want me to stop at any point.
Right, on you go.
First one is, it's an excellent report. It's very good to see that we are looking ahead and planning for the parks. One of the things that the report recognises is that transport links are an issue, probably with 2 out of the 3, I would think, if not the third one as well. Do you have any outline plan how we can improve this? On Pallasrig Park itself, do we have any further developments and discussions with the Pallasrig Animal Farm Group? And do Cumbernauld Living Landscape have a role in Pallasrig? The next points are really on Strathclyde. Very interested in this park power stuff. Over the last few months, the reports on it coming out have been very interesting. I take it that it will be a water source heat extraction at Strathclyde Park, or am I wrong in that? Is there any potential for hydropower given the vicinity of the Clyde to Strathclyde Park. And on the photovoltaics, I take it that there's been an efficiency increase in the amount of power that we can get from PV over the last number of years. It's really just to see whether the panels would be placed on buildings, or do we have plans for a bank of them? Maybe too early to say, but it would just be interesting to see. And with the, if it is heat source from the water, would Drumpelia be another site that we could use this in the future? Thanks.
Okay, you're right. A number of questions there. Nicole, are you happy to come in and take the questions? Thanks.
I am, Councillor McPake. I'll try and take them just one at a time in response, but I may ask for a prompt, Councillor Goldie, if that's okay. Okay, so in terms of the first question, which was around the transport links issue to each of our country parks, there are a number of studies and plans in motion at the moment. And what I should probably highlight at the outset is that within the country parks, a key component of any country park master plan is to look at the current access and egress, how communities are currently, and park users are currently using the parks, and how we can best improve those links. So what we have, for instance, at Palace Rig, is that we begin to open up more entrances to the park, particularly to take advantage of the new CG area on the edge of the park. Likewise, at Strathclyde Country Park, most interesting findings of the master plan is, of course, the link to Bells Hill, which is neither well defined nor well used at the moment, which can bring very easily a great deal more visitors to the park. And I think, as we've seen particularly importantly at the moment, that people are able to get easy access to green space, both for health and well-being benefits. In terms of transport, I'm still in the response to question one. What we're also looking at is active travel links within and beyond each of the parks. Active travel links, if members recall, the paper which went alongside the Country Parks for Future paper was about connecting North Lanarkshire and active travel routes. Those are all considered around the parks so that we improve access and egress. And of course, understanding that we want the parks to be accessible for all, there is of course existing car parks within each of the country parks, recognising that individuals need to travel to the parks in a variety of ways. So lots of possibilities, lots of emerging plans. I think in one of the later questions, Councillor Goldie reflected that these master plans are at a relatively early stage. But what we'll do is weave the transport links all the way through the developments that we do in terms of the country park master plans. Can I ask for a reminder in question two? I have all the others, but question two I didn't get.
Question two, there was, has there been any further developments and discussions with the Palace Rig Animal Farm Group? Now, I realise we're in a pandemic and it's unlikely that there would be any kind of vast movement on this. And I don't know, did you get the Cumbernauld Living Landscapes? Do they have a role in Palace Rig?
Yes, I've got that one, Councillor Goldie. Okay, so initially there are discussions ongoing with a number of potential users of the park, and the Palace Rig Animal Farm Group are one of those who first approached us to talk about equine therapy. There are a number of other partners who discussions are ongoing with at the moment, which fits very well with the master plan in terms of our hope that it becomes a third sector hub and that we have other partners involved, particularly at Palace Rig Country Park. In terms of Cumbernauld Living Landscapes, we don't currently, I understand, have an interest from Cumbernauld Living Landscapes, but I think in terms of the consultations that have been undertaken to date, they are very inclusive. We look for partners to come forward and give their views, and principally to get involved in the park, and that will continue going forward, because I think the key thing about the paper today is 10-year master plans for each of the country parks, and as we take forward each of the key ideas, then there will be further consultation on those as well, Councillor Goldie. If I turn to Strathclyde Country Park and the Park Power project, it is indeed a very exciting project and a particular focus for Scotland in terms of its renewable energy opportunities. It is a first Strathclyde Country Park, which is why we, together with our partners, have focused on that park in particular. You've asked for some very specific questions. I'm afraid I don't have the answers to those specific questions today. It's not my area of expertise, but you did reflect that the study is really at a very early stage. But what we see from the outset of that study is that it is extremely positive in terms of the potential at Strathclyde Park. A potential ground heat resource of 81 megawatts. Bearing in mind that would supply the park and beyond the park as well as resources in terms of heat resource within the loch, 6.6 megawatts, and PV potential infrastructure as well. So at this stage, very, very positive, but the phase 2 studies are ongoing at Strathclyde Park. We will, of course, you mentioned Drumpelia, we will, of course, look at the other potential, but what we want to do is continue to a conclusion at Strathclyde Park, and again, weave that through the master plan proposals.
Just to add to that, Chair, the Council has proven excellent in the past with the heating of the time capsule. That was fairly innovative at the time, and so it's good to see that we're still thinking along those kind of lines.
Absolutely, Willie, thanks for that. And absolutely, we're always thinking on the ground, as the previous report, and Waste said, we're always looking to do something and to make sure that we're getting a bang for a buck, as I say. Geraldine, I see you want to come in. Geraldine Woods.
Convener, I was in first and you've ignored me.
Oh, I'm very sorry. Jim, sorry about that. On you go.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of points and questions. It's mainly on the Strathclyde Park. And I know in the report where you keep talking about the travel infrastructure and key active travel hubs. Now, my main concern is the closure of the road. It means that people from Motherwell who want to visit the graveyard have to come through Bellsill, and people from Bellsill who want to visit the Water Sports Centre have to get through Motherwell. And especially the people coming from Motherwell through Bellsill, they have to come up the road at the golf course, which is a very small road as it is, and it's increased traffic. I also think that on the Hamilton Road in Bellsill from 3 o'clock to 6 is due to that road closure, because a number of people would use that road to go home. And I would invite any officer to come and stand at the Hamilton Road from 3 o'clock to 6 and watch the traffic. It's nose to tail. I think that the closure of that road is just contradictory in terms to active travel hubs. And also in the consultation, you've closed the road and then you're consulting. That's back to front to me. But I would like to know who was consulted on this closure and why it was just done. Also the cost, they putting boulders in, taking them away, then building barriers. It seems to me that there's a foregone conclusion you're going to close it before the consultation. And also you mentioned the pump track plus. A pump track's a bike thing, I believe. Is this not just a fad, the same as the skateboard parks were a number of years ago? Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks for that. We don't do fads, I don't think. Hopefully we don't do fads, Jim. And I really apologise for overlooking you at the start. And I apologise for that. A lot of the stuff you talk about, Jim, was done through emergency legislation, and it wasn't just done in Strathclyde Park. I can see Robert. Robert, do you want to come in here before I bring Nicole back in? Robert.
And you can decide if Nicole needs to come in. In terms of the road, we are going to carry out a consultation for the longer term aspect of the road in the country park, but it was closed as a result of COVID. And if you remember, right away back in March, the country park itself was closed. We restricted all access to it. And when we reopened it, we made the decision that we wanted to promote use of the park. We wanted to promote cycling and pedestrian activity. And that decision was taken, and I think widely supported by the users of the park. And what I would say, Councillor Redden, is the park road was never designed to be a main road from any town to another town. It's an internal park road. It's not even part of the road network. It's a private road. And I know it was used as a rat run. I lived in Orbison for 11 years, and I used it myself, but that was not the purpose of it. It's an internal road within the park. So at the moment, what we are intending to maintain the closure while we carry out a consultation on the longer term aspect of whether we open the road or not. And I think it's important that we get the views of the wider community as well as the park users for that, and Nicole will do that. In terms of the cycle hub and whether it's a fad or not, Certainly, the pump track which has been put in at Wishaw has been a huge success. It's well used. It's been adopted by the community, and they're actually maintaining it, using it, and looking after it. And it's been recognised worldwide, such that it's actually become a worldwide venue. And we want to expand that success, and we will expand it as far as there's a community demand for it. So whether it goes the way of skate parks or not, I don't think that that's the case. In terms of the longer term plans for cycling, this is just a different aspect of cycling, whether it be road cycling, cycling within the park, or whether it's the pump track part. And I think that's an area, not just for lifestyle, but in terms of health and well-being, which is a growing area. So we'll take it forward. But as Nicole has said quite a few times, that this is part of the development of the master plan, and we want to take it forward. We've got a lot of planning to do. We've got a lot of community consultation to do. And if the community comes back and says they want something else, then obviously as a council we will have to listen to that. But at the moment we're seeing a degree of support for it. Thanks very much, convener.
Thanks for that, Robert. Just not to muddy the waters any further, but there's also a road closure in Drumpeller Park and Coatbridge, and it was totally supported by the community. Geraldine, would you like to come in now?
Yeah, thanks, convener. As a comment and a question, I mean, I go to Strathclyde Park twice a week, 3 times a week, and the closure of the road is actually good because of the path so muddy. It's better walking that other way. The question was, you know, everybody's going to walking. We're all going to Strathclyde Park. We're going to Dumpelia. What about the facilities? I mean, why are they not opened? I mean, it takes you sometimes an hour and a half to walk around the park, and there are no facilities for the children. I mean, I don't want to go into detail, but like the toilet facilities, there's nothing opened. I mean, you can go to a cafe. It's not to do with the Scottish Gaelic. You can go to a cafe and you can go into a toilet, or you can go to a historic castle and go into they're all open. So why is the park facilities not opened for the public?
Nicole or Robert, do you want to come in that? Robert?
Probably basis I come in, it's actually not so much about the park. It's more again, it's about the control of infection. The facilities that you have described are in facilities which are open, manned, and inside, and the cleaning and the maintenance of those facilities can be controlled. And we cannot put almost full-time toilet attendants into the toilets at Strathclyde Park. And if you look at up and down Scotland, you'll find that I think almost every council has got its public toilets closed, and it's for that very reason, because they are points of high risk in terms of transmission of infection, because there's lots of touch points in them. They tend to be tight and lots of people want to use them. So I would say at the current time we would not be proposing to open those public toilets, and we would only do so once we've had the appropriate public health advice that in terms of prevalence of infection in the community, that it's safe to do so.
Okay, thanks for that, Robert. Megan Gallagher, you're next.
Thanks very much, convener. The Conservative group have an amendment.
Okay, well, I'll ask for any other questions or comments before we go to the amendment.
Thank you.
Don't see any. So, Megan, you want to give us your amendment, please?
Certainly, convener.
Sorry, Councillor Gallagher, do you want me to share your amendment on screen?
Yes, please, Mark, that would be great. Thank you. Convener, will I go ahead and start speaking to it? If that's
on you
okay.
go. On you go. Right.
So the paper in Country Parks for the future contains a lot of information within its 7 pages, and although it is an update, it provides more information than what has been brought to previous committees. As you can see from our amendment, the Conservative group would like to add in 3 additional recommendations. The first recommendation at point 2, as we remain concerned about the through road at Strathclyde Park, as many Motherwell residents just access road off Hamilton Road to travel to Bodwell Hall Cemetery, as Councillor Redden articulated. I had a really productive meeting with Nicole and Robert this morning about the road, and the current consultation is underway. We also discussed the issues relating to the access to the cemetery from Bells Hill, and that the road is not wide enough to accommodate traffic travelling in both directions. For this reason, we feel it's appropriate to add this concern as a recommendation to ensure this is taken into consideration as part of the consultation process. We have also added in recommendation 3 and 4 as it relates to the closure of Kilbowie and the proposed plans by North Lanarkshire Council to build an outdoor experience centre in Motherwell. Although I fully support more facilities for our young people, the whole point of visiting an outdoor residential centre is to gain vital independence skills away from home. It is a rite of passage into teenage years as they begin to transition from primary into secondary school. As the facility is located or could be located within my ward, it would mean some children would only need to walk 5 minutes down the road to visit this facility should it be built. And it's the Conservative group's opinion that a facility in Strathclyde Park will not give our young people that sense of excitement the way a facility outside of the local authority area would. As I've argued many times before, there are a lot of outdoor residential centres for our outdoor people to use, and now more than ever we should be showing our support by agreeing to use their facilities once we're out of this pandemic. This is why during the budget process the Conservative group wanted to make sure that a subsidy fund was set up to help schools with the costing of sending children to an outdoor residential facility which is outside of North Lanarkshire. This is what we're proposing again today. We're fully supportive of an outdoor residential experience, but we're not sure of a centre being built at Strathclyde Park in North Lanarkshire, and it's for these reasons, Convener, that I'm proposing the Conservative group amendment today. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Have you got a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll second.
Well, what I would say, right away, I would say, like, this report really seeks for approval on phase 1 of the master plan, and it doesn't mention anything about bringing forward the outdoor facility. I think that's much further down the line, and whether we ever get there or not is a different kettle of fish. So, I mean, I think your concerns are a bit premature at this point in time, Megan. I really do. Have you got anybody else want to come in on any of the aspects we spoke about? I don't see that, so we're going to move to, I'm going to recommend the report as is. And do I have a seconder, Nora? Yep, okay, so we'll move straight to the vote. Mark?
So we've got the amendment from Councillor Gallagher, as was on screen, and the motion by yourself, Chair, which is contained within the recommendation of the report. So I'll just go through in alphabetical order the elected members. So Councillor Anderson is not on the meeting. Councillor Ashraf.
Motion. The original recommendations.
I think we've got a point of order from Councillor Goldie.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see that, Wally. On you go.
Aye. Just Convener, this is really sprung upon us in that we don't have actually time to consider the amendment itself and any cost implications. Closures of roads and that in some of the places are actually coming under health guidelines. I think it would be very difficult for anyone to make a decision, certainly on this, in the space of 2 minutes or something. I think it's actually putting members in the position where they don't actually have time to consider what the amendment actually means.
You're right, but this is the setup we're in just now. It should, I think we've mentioned in the past at committees where this sort of thing crops up. I mean, you don't get given any time, and this is where we are, Wally. And unfortunately, we've got to go with it. I mean, so we've got the motion and the amendment, and you're right about the implications and whatnot. It's already been highlighted, but the road closures are there for a reason. So I think, unfortunately, we need to go with what we've got just now. So we'll go with motion or amendment. So Mark, back to you.
Sorry, Convener. So if you were, just to clarify for members, we've got the recommendations contained within the report, and we've got the additional amendment from Councillor Gallagher, which contains 3 additional recommendations to that. Going back to Councillor Goldie's point in relation, I don't think there's any decision being taken today. I think it was looking for further reports being brought back and to note concerns at this stage. and it was asking that the report be brought back to the relevant committee. So I don't think in relation to that, Councillor Goldie, there's no financial implications of the proposals. If you want me to continue on, Councillor McPake, I'll continue on. I think Councillor Ashraf had went with the motion, which is the recommendations contained within the report.
Yeah. Okay, just carry on then, Mark.
Right, Councillor Carica.
Motion.
Councillor Cullen's an apology. Councillor Damasio. Councillor Docherty and Doolan are also apologies, so we'll move on to Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor Duffy.
Motion.
Councillor Goldie.
Motion.
Councillor Gourley.
Motion.
Councillor Hogg.
Motion as well.
Councillor Lennon. I don't see Councillor Lennon on the meeting. Councillor
Yeah.
Logue. Oh, Councillor Lennon's on. Apologies, Councillor Lennon. That's motion, Councillor Lennon. Noted.
Please, Mark.
Councillor Logue. I've got you on under motion, Councillor Lennon. Councillor Logue.
Motion.
Councillor McManus.
Motion.
Councillor McNeil.
Motion.
Councillor McPake.
Motion.
Councillor Mooney.
Motion.
Councillor Redding.
Motion.
Councillor Rorty.
Motion.
Councillor Stocks.
Motion.
Councillor Weir.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson. Just seeing if Councillor Wilson's on the meeting. Yes. Councillor Wilson. No response from Councillor Wilson. Councillor Woods.
Motion.
Motion. And finally, Councillor Gallagher.
Amendment, and I believe that Councillor Wilson's screen is froze, so he can't actually vote at this point in time. So am I allowed to vote on his behalf?
Unfortunately, in terms of standing orders, Councillor Gallagher, you're not allowed to vote on Councillor Wilson's behalf.
Thanks for the clarification, Mark.
No problem. Convener, following the vote, there was the amendment attracted 2 votes. The motion attracted 18 votes.
Thanks for that, Mark. Moving on to item 5, which is Amy Public Services LLP Operational and Financial Performance Monitoring Report from April 2020 to September 2020. Again, colleagues, this is here for noting, so I'm just going to ask, is there any questions on it? I take it you've all had a chance to read it. Are there any questions? Wally?
Thanks, Convener. I've got 2 or 3. First one is on page 28, 2.7. There's a statement saying largely satisfies the Council's oversight provision. Just intrigued by the use of the word largely rather than satisfies the Council oversight provision. Next one is page 34.1.6 is have we ever received dividends? And if we did, what budget would they go in? Page 34.1.7, how would any management fee be calculated? Is there a mechanism for calculating it? And the last one is in page 31, it's 4.1.8, and it's on the overall financial strategy. Are we as a council satisfied about the current financial standing? If the parent company gets it wrong, is there likely to be any liability for NLC? Thanks.
Thanks for that, Wally. Nicole, do you want to... Oh, sorry, Robert, you want to come in? On you go, Robert.
I'll come in first about some of the issues, and Nicole can pick up anything that I missed. But really, just in terms of the parent company loan, councillors, Amy have given a commitment, and they do so every year, that whatever cover and support is required from the parent company, that they will provide it. and as it's noted in the report that there's no need to increase that provision at the moment, but the AME parent company are very clear about that. And in terms of the dividend, we've never received a dividend because the company's never been in profit, but we do receive the best value efficiency saving every year, which comes from that. And I have to say, for the last few years, AME haven't had a management fee either because of the position of the company, because you'll see that over the terms of the contract that they're going to lose that £7 million. So in terms of that, in terms of calculating as such, the provisions are outlined in the contract. So any fees, any best value payment, any management fee, any dividend, it's laid out in the contract how that would be calculated. It would come into the council, and Elaine Kemp would take it into and deal with it as part of the normal treasury management. So it wouldn't necessarily go back to the service. It comes into the council, and it's dealt with as a council budget issue, and it would be decided for what would happen therefore. But we're not in that position at the moment, Councillor Goldie. And in terms of largely satisfying, that's generally down to when the annual accounts are signed off. Because the company is a subsidiary of a company, and they've also got the council ownership, it tends to be that we're at the wire in terms of signing off the annual accounts. We've never had an issue with getting them signed off. It's just a timing issue, and they tend to run late because the parent company runs up to a similar date to this company, and the company accounts have to be agreed before the subsidiary company accounts are. So it's more to do with accounting practice rather than any issue we've got with it. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Robert, Will, are you happy with that? Yep. Okay, I don't see any other further questions in the chat bar. So, colleagues, are you happy to note this report? Okay, thank you very much. That takes us on to item 6, which is update in the tree asset management strategy. Nicole.
Thank you, convener. I hope it's a bit easier for me to say. Okay, so members will be aware that a paper was previously brought which outlined the extensive nature of the council's tree assets. The council has a significant tree resource, much of which is mature or over mature. However, across the council, the full extent and condition of the asset is entirely unknown and not under any proactive management. So the work which has been carried out since the last committee, the team within environmental assets has been developing a strategic approach to tree asset management, which will include the production of a draft strategy. The draft strategy will only cover perceived high-risk trees at the outset, which sit within council ownership. And to be clear, these are those managed by and maintained by environmental assets, and the other council-owned trees adjacent to highways and schools, so those which are form the highest risk. The update report, I'm pleased to say, outlines the significant progress which the service has made since February to better manage the risk, including the procurement of a pilot risk audit that will focus on 2 particular wards of the council, Ward 12, Airdrie South, and Ward 19, Motherwell South East and Ravenscraig. It's the information from this pilot audit which will inform the council's fuller strategic approach to rationalising the tree asset resource and responsibility for all tree assets across the council. Just for members to note that there are resource implications in establishing both an inspection and management regime which is required to deliver the strategy. And the report has 2 recommendations today to committee. The other details are within the report, but I'm happy to take any questions, convener.
Thanks for that, Nicole. As you can see, colleagues, this is an ongoing thing, and we're sort of working our way through it just now. So, Willie, I see your name in the chat bar. Willie.
Thanks, convener. Just a couple of things. In the executive summary, I note that the council tenant properties are not covered in this. Is this because they're covered elsewhere, or are they going to be removed from council liability? The other question is on page 43, 2.9. It's on the tree planting. Whenever we're talking about looking at a strategy for planting trees, do we have a strategy idea? Is it going to be woodlands, or is it going to be individual trees? And will we be taking in any future maintenance into the consideration?
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Willie. Nicole, do you want to come in and answer that, please?
Absolutely, convener. Thank you. Councillor Goldie, in terms of your first question as to what is included and what isn't included, this is simply about trying to establish the strategy and the approach. So it's not that the exclusions won't be included going forward. This should ultimately cover any council-owned tree or woodland, but at this point, what we've tried to look at is the highest risk trees, and those tend to be the trees that are adjacent to roads, carriageways, and buildings. So particularly buildings which are in large-scale use. So, for example, schools or council offices. So those are the ones that, from the outset, that we've focused on. It's probably worth me highlighting that whilst we don't know the scale of the asset, we know that it is extremely significant. So what we've tried to do is narrow down the highest risk trees and 2 pilot areas so that we can understand the full scale of the work which will be required to bring these trees and woodlands into proactive management as we go forward. The convener is quite correct that this will evolve, and I will bring regular reports back to committee so that you are aware of our findings and how we plan to bring these trees into management. On the second question, in terms of tree planting, because of course, whilst we want the assets we have to be brought back into management, that's not to say that, of course, in terms of climate change and carbon sequestration, etc., that it's not extremely important for us to continue to plant trees. The approach will take both forms, so it will be about individual trees where appropriate, with a focus ordinarily on local species. But of course, there are opportunities as well for us to put in woodlands at scale. So the team will look at both aspects as we move forward, and we'll see a strategy brought forward for the new planting of trees and woodlands as well. So the focus at the moment, simply because of the liability, is on how we bring those we have into management. But I have to say that we do, and we have ongoing planting of new trees as well. So it's not that that has stopped.
Thanks for that, Nicole. You happy with that, Willie? Yep. Don't see any further names in the chat bar. Colleagues, can I then ask you to page 39, the recommendations therein, and can I ask you to agree on them?
Agreed.
Okay, I don't see anybody disagreeing. Thanks very much for that. So that takes us on to item 7, which is the North Lanarkshire food growing strategy. Again, another good news story here, I think. So, Nicole, do you want to outline the salient points within the report? Thank you.
Thank you, convener. So yes, this report presents elected members with the first North Lanarkshire food growing strategy. Food growing strategy production is actually a statutory requirement under the Community Empowerment Scotland Act of 2015. That requirement is for us to identify land that could be used for any type of food growing. So, for example, allotment sites, community growing spaces within communities, and they can take any scale, basically, they can take any form, either large or small. I think it's important to note that the Council's responsibility isn't under the Community Empowerment Act to manage or maintain, but actually to identify and facilitate opportunities within communities for food growing. So the report basically does 3 things. It outlines the process undertaken to draft the strategy. It presents that strategy for approval today and outlines the further steps which will be required over the next 5 years to deliver and ultimately undertake a 5-year review of the strategy as well. Principally, identify support mechanisms that will contribute to an engaged, empowered and knowledgeable network of local food growers over the next 5 years. The strategy takes a very balanced and considered approach to encouraging and supporting new and existing growing spaces to help achieve food growing aspirations and meet local needs within our communities. Finally, the vision and strategic outcomes have been developed to meet the needs identified both through internal and community consultation, working with partners, and a phased action plan for delivery will be developed, and it will include the key food growing strategy actions which are presented in Appendix 1. There are 2 recommendations today for committee, and I'm happy to take any questions on the strategy.
Thanks for that, Nicole. And Wally, on you go.
Thanks again, convener. It's just to see whether we've looked at using derelict sites for kind of pop-up urban gardens. I know that many towns and cities throughout the UK have did this quite successfully. Is there potential in that?
Nicole?
Thank you, convener. Councillor Goldie, yeah, thanks for the question. You're absolutely correct that there is potential in that. The reality is we have very many sites that have the potential for community food growing. So some of them, as I mentioned earlier, are simply corner plots. We mustn't overlook individuals' gardens either, but derelict land, particularly for raised beds, does form opportunities. But I think the key thing, and I think the key thing that the strategy shows as well, is that the majority of community food growing across Scotland, and it's reflected actually in the figures for North Lanarkshire as well, I think some 78% of people, they actually want to undertake the community food growing in their own gardens. So whether that's via, if you like, a miniature allotment plot within their garden or some raised beds. So what we want to do as we move forward is very much respond to needs within communities. We don't want to be releasing land which is not within the vicinity. We know again that we don't want to encourage travel by car, etc., to community allotments or community growing sites. We want them to be local to the communities who need them. So that's what we'll look to evolve over the next 5 years. But there's no doubt that this provides the council with, and its communities with, some very interesting opportunities. And you'll see in the action plan that much of it is around capacity building and allowing communities to understand more about food growing and become sufficient themselves.
Thanks for that, Nicole. Paddy Hogg.
Thanks, convener. And thank you, Nicole, for an excellent report. It's good to see that August this has been included as well. The main reason that motion was moved was based on a fact that in the UK, we tend to grow 45% of the fruit and veg that we consume in the whole of the UK, which means if there was a hard Brexit or any issues with fruit and veg being imported, have possible starvation in the UK. So I think we need to move what we are moving brilliantly with the stuff that's being done here and the recommendations, and hopefully communicated well to members of the public, to encourage as many people as possible to get involved in allotments or even where we can help with their own gardens, etc. So I'm delighted to see this report and the action that's being taken. So thanks for that.
Thanks for that, Paddy. Very positive. Colleagues, I don't see any further names in the chat bar, so can I then direct you to page 45 where we have two recommendations. Can I ask for your agreement with them? I don't see any disagreement, so thanks for that. And I'm going to move on to item 8, and it's an oversight report on the Strathclyde Partnership for Transport and the Concessionary Travel Scheme. My colleagues, the report is here for noting, so I'll just ask straight away for any questions. Anybody got any questions in this report? Don't see any, so I'll be happy to note this report. Okay, thank you for that. Takes us on to item 9. Again, it's to contracts awarded to treatment paper and cardboard. So that's item 9. Again, this is here for noting, and have we got any questions on it? Willie?
It's just a question. Obviously, the value of the contract and the stuff getting taken away depends on the quality of the recycler. Do we still, I know that previously the Office of the Council would monitor this. I take it we still have a monitoring role?
Who's Andrew?
Yes, we have a we can call it an ongoing relationship with our processor, where we will send officers up to the actual site to monitor, so we can agree with their assessment of the quality of the material that we're delivering. But it actually goes back to the point that was raised in one of the first papers about the price for paper and card. The last contract we had, we were projecting an income, and now we're projecting a significant expenditure.
Okay, thanks for that, Andrew. Don't see any further comments in the chat bar, colleagues. Can we ask you to note the report? Okay, thanks for that. Moving on to item 10. Again, it's here for noting. It's a Winter Assistance Framework Programme. Colleagues, has anyone got any questions? Wally?
Thanks, convener. It's just a kind of a wee bit of a kind of technical question. It's just on page 604, and a couple. There are differences between the pre-procurement
604.
estimate. Sorry, is it 604? It's item 10 anyway. It's on the final, just the final page, just about. Hold on, I'll get it. Sorry, 104. I'm too excited about the length of the committee there, Michael. It's just a question on. There's a couple of differences between the.
Willie, I think you've moved on to. You're on to item 11. We're still dealing with.
Apologies then for that.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Cheers.
Right, so can I take it then we're all happy with item 10 and we're happy to note that? Yes, okay. Right, moving on to item 11. Willie.
Thanks, convener. I'll get it right this time. Just a couple of the differences between the pre-procurement estimate and the contract value, including extension. Is there a point when these differences are flagged up? I take it, I know we have the limits on, is it 500,000 and 2 million on it? What actually happens in these circumstances? I take it it's monitored, but if it changes by a certain percentage, is it flagged up?
Robert, you want to come in on that?
I can come in the contract standing orders. It's a very definite limit on what can be awarded. So if the estimate is below that limit and we go to tender, if it comes back in and the lowest acceptable tender is above that limit, then we would have to come to committee for approval rather than just report it as this. So it's a very definite limit. It's not a percentage thing.
Okay, colleagues, I don't see any further hands in the air or names in the chat bar. So that brings us to the conclusion.